Back in 1992, I was working as the campus machine shop manager at a university in Washington, D.C. I was 6'2" and around 300 pounds at the time. I spent most of my free time lifting weights, so I was built solid. The job was pretty good, steady work fixing and maintaining all the equipment around campus. I had been working there for about 2 years when this incident happened. The university had this nice quad area where students and staff would hang out between classes or during lunch breaks. It was one of those perfect spots with big old trees and plenty of benches scattered around. I had eaten lunch there plenty of times before without any problems. This particular day in early May was beautiful. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a nice breeze. I had packed my lunch that morning like I always did. I made myself what I called my signature sandwich, a real monster of a thing on a 12-inch sub roll. I loaded it up with turkey, ham, roast beef, salami, Swiss cheese, cheddar, lettuce, tomatoes, and all the fixings. It was basically a classic sandwich with everything I could fit on it. I found my usual spot on the quad, laid out my lunch on the bench, and pulled out the book I had been reading. I took a big bite of my sandwich and settled in for a peaceful lunch break. The quad was busier than usual, but I did not think much of it at first. When I was about to take my second bite, I noticed three guys in their 20s standing maybe 20 feet away. They kept looking at me and whispering to each other. One of them seemed to be the leader of the group. He was doing most of the talking while the other two just nodded along. Finally, the leader walked over to me. He had this smug expression on his face like he was about to make some big point. He asked me what kind of sandwich I was eating. I looked up from my book, a little annoyed at being interrupted but trying to be polite. I told him it was just a sub sandwich with turkey, ham, roast beef, salami, and a couple different cheeses. When I started listing the meats, all three of them got this look on their faces like I had just confessed to murder. The leader's expression went from smug to angry, real quick. He asked if I had any idea what I was doing right now. I told him I was eating lunch. That is when all three of them exploded. They started yelling about how meat was murder, how I was contributing to animal cruelty, how the meat industry was destroying the planet. They went on and on about factory farming, and how I should be ashamed of myself. The whole quad started staring at us. I sat there for a minute listening to this nonsense, then decided to have a little fun with them. I asked them if they knew where the word vegetarian comes from. They all looked confused, so I continued. I told them that vegetarian was an old American Indian word for poor hunter. I went back to my book and took another bite of my sandwich. I thought maybe they would get the hint and leave me alone, but I was wrong. The leader was furious. His face was red and he was practically shaking. He asked if I thought this was funny, if I thought animal suffering was a joke. Before I could answer, he reached over and ripped the book right out of my left hand. Then he smacked the sandwich out of my right hand. My lunch went flying and landed on the ground. But he was not done. He actually stepped on my sandwich and ground it into the dirt with his heel. He had this satisfied smile on his face like he had just won some great victory. Then he started waving his finger right in my face, getting way too close to me. He asked what I thought of that, calling me tough guy in a mocking tone. That is when I had had enough. I grabbed his wrist and stretched his arm out straight. With one sharp blow to his elbow joint, I hyperextended it the wrong way. There was a loud crack and he dropped to the ground screaming and holding his arm. The second guy must have thought he could take me. He came running at me with his fist raised, probably thinking he could catch me off guard while I was dealing with his friend. I blocked his punch easily and landed a hard shot right to the center of his chest. He went down like a sack of bricks and did not get back up. By the time I turned to see what the third guy was going to do, campus security was already running over. The third guy had his hands up and was backing away fast. Smart move on his part. The campus security officer yelled for everyone to stay where they were and not to move. The officer called for backup and an ambulance. The first guy was still on the ground moaning about his arm, and the second guy was just starting to sit up and catch his breath. The third guy kept trying to explain to the officers that I was the aggressor, that I had attacked them for no reason. The third guy insisted that I had just gone crazy, that they were just talking to me about my lunch, and I attacked them. I told the officers that They had destroyed my lunch and the leader put his finger in my face, so I defended myself. The campus police detained all four of us until the real police showed up. They took statements from everyone, including some witnesses who saw the whole thing. I spent that night in jail, which was not exactly how I planned to end my day. A few weeks later, we all had to appear in court. When it was my turn to tell my side of the story, I kept it short and simple. I explained to the judge that I was eating lunch on campus when these three men approached me and began yelling about my food choices. When I tried to ignore them, one of them destroyed my lunch and put his finger in my face in a threatening manner. I told the court that I defended myself when I felt threatened. Then it was their turn to speak. That is when things got interesting. Instead of just explaining what happened, they launched into this long speech about veganism and animal rights. They talked about factory farming, environmental destruction, and how the judge should understand that they were just trying to educate people about the horrors of eating meat. The judge let them talk for about 10 minutes before he had had enough. He told them that this was a courtroom, not a lecture hall. He explained that they were there because they were accused of disturbing the peace and destruction of property, not to give speeches about their dietary choices. The leader interrupted and insisted that the judge needed to understand the moral implications of what I was doing. The judge responded that what he understood was that they destroyed my property and got physical with me first. He noted that the witness statement supported my version of events. The judge dropped all charges against me. The three guys had to pay court fees, fines for disturbing the peace, and they had to reimburse me for my destroyed lunch. The leader also had to pay for his own medical bills for his broken elbow. When we were leaving the courthouse, the third guy, the one who was smart enough not to try fighting me, came up to me. He apologized for what happened and said that those two got way out of line. I told him that next time maybe they should just let people eat their lunch in peace. I never saw any of them on campus again after that. I heard the leader had to have surgery on his elbow and could not use his right arm properly for months. The second guy apparently had some cracked ribs from where I hit him. I kept eating my lunch on the quad whenever the weather was nice. Nobody ever bothered me about my food choices again. I was born in the UK, but when I was 4, my family moved to the French-speaking part of Switzerland for my dad's job. Growing up there meant I learned French naturally, just from being around native speakers every day. By the time I was 14, I spoke French so fluently that people were always surprised when I switched effortlessly between English and French. At my school, I was the only student besides the English teacher who was truly fluent in English, so the administration often paired me with new English-speaking students to help them adjust. That's how I met him. Let me call the entitled son and his mother Karen, because she definitely earned that title. One morning during first period, the dean's voice crackled through the intercom calling my name. My stomach dropped. Getting called to the dean's office usually meant serious trouble, and I'd never been in trouble before. Every head in the classroom turned to stare while I gathered my things, clearly wondering what I could have possibly done. I knocked hesitantly on the dean's office door, my anxiety making me think I'd somehow screwed up without realizing it. Inside, the dean sat at her desk with the English teacher beside her. Across from them sat a woman who appeared to be from the Middle East and a boy about my age. The dean introduced me to the entitled son, explaining he'd just arrived at school and only spoke English. I was being paired with him to help with communication and getting around. He seemed friendly enough at first, and once Karen questioned whether I was decent enough for her son, she left and we headed to class. The first few weeks went smoothly. The entitled son didn't have to take the same tests as me since he was still learning, and I taught him French basics when needed. He picked up enough for basic communication pretty quickly. Everything was fine until my attendance started getting spotty. I need to explain something here. The previous school year had been hell because of bullying, and by early May my mental health was crashing hard. I was dealing with severe depression and suicidal thoughts that made me afraid to leave the house. I just spent 2 nights in the mental health unit at the local hospital. When I returned to school after 3 days away, the entitled son immediately found me. I was exhausted, depressed, and anxious. He demanded to know where I'd been for the last 3 days. complaining that he barely understood anything and got detention for not doing homework he couldn't understand. When I asked if he'd even attempted it, he said no, claiming he didn't understand anything. I sighed, knowing he was lying. When he showed me the assignment, it confirmed what I thought. He knew enough French to at least try. I apologized anyway and just got on with catching up on my own work while helping him. I didn't want to explain what I was going through. My toxic relationship at the time wasn't helping my mental state either. A few days later, I was absent again for one day, and I was leaving school early regularly for almost daily appointments at the mental health unit. The entitled son wasn't pleased, and apparently he complained to his mother. When I got back to school, Karen was waiting for me. The entitled son approached while she stood nearby, shooting me death looks. He told me he had a test in a few days and didn't understand the revision stuff at all. He demanded that I teach him to speak French. I explained that I've been teaching him what he needed and he should be fine. But then he clarified what he really wanted. He didn't just want help with his test. He wanted me to teach him French so he could be as fluent as me. When I told him there was no way I could make him fluent in the space of a few days because it was impossible, he completely lost it. He screamed that I would teach him French or his mother would get me removed from school. I started to walk away, but Karen grabbed my arm and spun me around to face her. I asked her not to touch me since I barely knew her, but she ignored that completely. She told me I would teach her son French or she would take matters to the headmaster. She spoke quietly to avoid drawing attention, but her grip was firm. I tried to be respectful, explaining that there was no way I could do what they wanted. I was helping him when I could when I was at school, but I couldn't do more because I was busy outside of school. Karen then demanded to know why her baby kept telling her I was leaving school early, insisting it was her business because I wasn't helping her beautiful boy. When I told her that was none of her business, she completely snapped and started yelling that it was her business because I wasn't helping her beautiful boy. I yanked my arm free and walked into the building, furious that she thought she had any right to be grabbing students on school property. By mid-May, the mental health unit had signed me off school for the rest of the year because I couldn't even leave the house most days. I was spending most of my time at the unit and eventually became a temporary inpatient. The facility had regular rooms for full patients and 2 extra rooms for people who needed to stay overnight but weren't fully hospitalized. I was coming back each evening and had stopped bothering to pack my stuff since I kept returning. The entitled son only had my Instagram because I refused to give him my phone number. He'd been messaging me constantly, demanding I teach him and asking where I was. Fed up with his harassment, I finally told him everything about my mental health situation. He demanded my phone number so we could actually talk. Instead, I convinced him to give me his number so I could call him. Before calling, I installed an app that made my number show up as private, and I screen recorded the entire call for proof. I called him from my room at the unit. He immediately started screaming at me, calling me names and demanding to know why I was lying to him. Even with my headphones on low volume, his shouting startled me. When I asked what he thought I was lying about, he kept yelling that I knew what I was lying about. I told him he'd need to clear it up because I didn't know what he was talking about. That's when he accused me of lying about my mental health, claiming I was making it up so I didn't have to teach him French and could avoid him. Then he said something that made my blood boil. He told me that since I was a girl and he was a boy, I should respect him as my superior. An idea popped into my head. That day I was staying at the unit because a room was opening up for me to become a full inpatient. It was Friday, and on Saturday morning we had a culture group activity where we went to the museum. I told him if he wanted to see me face to face, he could meet me at the museum tomorrow around 10 in the morning because I'd be there. He told me I would regret saying that, and I hung up. No, I wouldn't regret it. I'd be there with my new friend from the unit. Let me call him Jamie. We'd clicked instantly when I arrived and had become inseparable, acting like we'd known each other for years. We'd be in a group of 2 with a nurse supervising us. There were only 4 patients since one had left Saturday morning, so each pair got a nurse to keep an eye on us. Not that we'd do anything, but they had to be sure. The nurses at this unit were amazing, genuinely friendly and caring, unlike other mental health facilities in the city. We stayed on the top two floors of an apartment building, so it felt homey rather than like a hospital. It was basically shared living. I handed over my phone. Patients have a no phone rule for the first 48 hours and moved upstairs. Saturday morning came, and after breakfast we headed to the museum. I was with Jamie and my favorite nurse from all the rotating shifts. Let me call her Carol. Of course, the entitled son and Karen were at the museum. They found us fairly quickly after Jamie, Carol, and I started exploring and discussing the exhibits. The entitled son spotted me first and told his mother that the little witch who was rude to him was over there, pointing directly at me. Karen walked over. She started screaming at me, calling me names, and accusing me of lying about mental health to her precious child to make him fail his test. She also yelled that I was taking up space in the hospital for those who actually needed it. The entitled son had obviously told her or shown her my Instagram messages about my situation. Before you judge me for what happened next, remember I was severely depressed and anxious with several other mental health issues, so I got upset easily. I'd only agreed to this meeting because I was sick of the harassment. Her yelling made me start crying, which got Carol's attention. She came over while Jamie pulled me into a protective hug. Carol asked Karen why she was yelling at me and pointed out that she could see she was making me unhappy. Carol spoke in English since she was quite fluent. Karen responded by screaming that I was a little liar who refused to teach her son French and was taking up room at the psycho unit because I was lying about mental health. Carol corrected her, saying that first, just because these adolescents suffer mental health problems doesn't mean they are psychos. Second, she shouldn't insult me. And third, she wanted to know what made Karen think I was lying about mental health, because she had access to my case notes from the past 2 months that could prove otherwise. Karen wasn't having any of this. She stormed over to me and forcibly pulled me away from Jamie, grabbing me harshly by the arms. It was really painful because of recent self-harm, despite the thick hoodie I was wearing. This woman knew it hurt. She actually pulled up my sleeves to look at my arms with disgust, then deliberately ran her nails over my scabs, making me bleed again. Carol and several other people around us were getting security, who arrived just when Karen was actively hurting me. Security yanked her off me and demanded to know why she'd done that. She just kept yelling at them. A kind security officer brought Jamie, Carol, and me to where they kept the emergency medical kit and bandaged me up properly. Because of everything that happened, Karen was taken to jail for questioning. I was allowed my phone back on an exception when we returned to the unit because a police officer came with us so I could show them the recorded call and the entitled son's harassing messages. After all this, the entitled son was suspended from school for harassment and Karen was sentenced to 6 months of community service. I also managed to get a restraining order against both of them. This happened back when I was in college, about 2 years into my computer science degree. Money was tight, like it is for most students, but my roommate and I had found this one little luxury we could afford. Every Monday night, we'd scrape together enough cash to hit up this local wing joint for their Buffalo Wing Night Special. The place wasn't fancy or anything, just your typical college town dive bar with sticky floors and mismatched chairs. But the wings were the real deal. We'd tried every level of spice they had on the menu, and honestly, even their suicide level wasn't that impressive. It tasted like they just dumped a bunch of regular hot sauce on them. My roommate and I both grew up eating spicy food, so we were always left wanting more heat. This particular Monday started like any other. We'd just finished a brutal midterm week, and we were both stressed and looking forward to our usual wing therapy session. We grabbed our regular table number 8, right in the corner, where we could see into the kitchen through the service window. That's when we spotted him again. The cook. This guy was massive, probably 6'4" with arms like tree trunks and covered in tattoos. He had this permanent scowl that said, "Don't mess with me," written all over his face. We'd seen him before during our previous visits, and he always looked like he could snap someone in half without breaking a sweat. My roommate looked at me with this mischievous grin I knew all too well. He suggested we should finally see if this guy could actually make wings that would make us sweat. I agreed, but we wondered how to get his attention since regular requests obviously didn't work. That's when I came up with what seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. Our usual waiter came over, the skinny kid who looked like he was maybe 19 and perpetually nervous. He asked if we wanted the same as usual. I told him we wanted to send a message back to the cook and asked him to write down exactly what I was about to say. The waiter pulled out his little notepad ready to scribble down our order. I told him to tell the cook that table 8 says he cannot make these wings spicy enough for us because he likes small boys and is not enough of a man to make them hot. The waiter's eyes went wide and he dropped his pen. He said he wasn't writing that down and asked if we were crazy. He said that guy would kill him. My roommate pulled out a $10 bill, which back then was serious money for broke college students. That was like a week's worth of ramen noodles. He told the waiter to just blame us and say we made him write it. He offered him $10 for his trouble. The waiter stared at the money for a moment, then snatched it up and reluctantly wrote down our message. He muttered that if he ended up dead, he was going to haunt both of us. He disappeared into the kitchen, and we could hear some muffled conversation. Then it got quiet. Too quiet. My roommate and I exchanged nervous looks. I said maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but my roommate pointed out it was too late now. About 20 minutes later, our order came out. A pitcher of their cheapest beer and 24 wings that looked normal enough, except for the smell. These things reeked of spice in a way that made our eyes water from 3 feet away. My roommate commented on the incredible smell, and I said maybe we should have been more careful what we wished for, but we were committed. We each grabbed a wing and took a bite at the same time. The heat hit like a freight train. My mouth felt like I'd swallowed molten lava. My eyes started streaming tears immediately, and I could feel sweat breaking out on my forehead. We both lunged for our beer glasses and drained the entire 16 ounces in one go. My roommate was gasping and asking what we had done to ourselves. I reminded him that we had asked for it. Somehow, we managed to finish that first wing each, but it took the entire pitcher of beer to get through just 2 wings total. That's when I noticed movement from the kitchen. The cook was standing in the doorway, and he was doubled over laughing. Tears were streaming down his face as he watched us suffer. He walked over to our table, still chuckling. He asked if we boys were having some trouble over there. I told him these were exactly what we had asked for. He said he'd make us a fresh batch and explained that those wings had been sitting at the bottom of his prep bucket for hours, soaking in all the pepper juice and chili oil. He said they never actually served those to customers. My roommate said that wasn't right though. We had challenged him. He delivered. And now we needed to finish what we started. The cook raised an eyebrow, looking genuinely surprised. He asked if we were sure about that and warned us those things could put someone in the hospital. I said we were sure, but we were going to need some backup. I pulled out my phone and called 2 of our friends who lived in the same dorm. I asked if they could come pick us up in about 2 hours because we were going to need them to drive my car home. My friend on the phone said it was Monday night and asked why we were going to be too drunk to drive. I told him to just trust me on this one and said we'd explain later. It took us 2 full hours and 3 pitchers of beer each to get through those wings. Every bite was agony. My tongue felt like it was on fire, my nose was running like a faucet, and I was sweating through my shirt. The restaurant wasn't too crowded, which was good because we were making some pretty pathetic noises. Halfway through, the cook came back out to check on us. He said we boys were tougher than he thought, and that most people would have given up by now. My roommate told him we were in most people. The cook said he could see that and showed his respect. When we finally finished the last wing, the cook came over and gave us both high fives. He said he was betting we wouldn't be asking for ultra spicy wings again. I told him no sir, we would not. I said he had beaten us and we acknowledged his superiority. We left him a tip that was probably bigger than our usual food budget for a week. Our friends showed up right on time, took one look at us, and immediately made us both sit in the back seat. The next 48 hours were absolutely brutal. Let's just say those wings burned just as much coming out as they did going in. I spent more time in the bathroom than I care to remember, and my roommates got pretty tired of hearing me groaning from behind the door. But you know what? They were the best wings I ever had.